Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Compliance Alliance webinar on the 5 pillars of purpose-driven profit with Kathy Ligon from Hinge Advisors. Hi, Kathy.
Hey, Lynn. Good to see you. Thanks for having me.
Yes, we're very excited for this conversation and expanding our scope on what compliance is, and especially how it dovetails with these pillars of financial profit, right? Of how we can put those practices in place. So that's what we're going to be diving into, folks. So we're going to go ahead and get started, and people will be joining in, but we'll just quickly go through our agenda today. Our agenda today will be about 45 minutes and be taking Q&A as we go. If there's something burning, don't hesitate to drop it into the chat, and we'll take it as we go. I'll be monitoring that as we progress here. So for today's agenda, we're going to be talking about compliance definitions and who are our stakeholders, trends in compliance, and of course, our featured guest speaker, Kathy Ligon. And Kathy, I am so excited that you are here as our subject matter expert because you have over 30 years of experience helping schools and leaders really look at their financial practices as they position for growth or succession strategy. So thank you so much for lending your voice to this conversation.
It's my very favorite thing to talk about, Lynn. So happy and honored to be here.
And I'm going to let you tell the Hinge Advisors story because I know you have some slides about that and a very cool initiative that our audience will be excited to hear about. So who is the Compliance Alliance? For those of you who don't know, you may recognize my face. Lynn Wenger here. I am the founder of the Compliance Alliance, and we exist to help turn compliance challenges into what I consider opportunities. I come at childcare from a business background. I fell in love with the industry about 8 years ago, and my background is on systems, processes, scaling, replicating, and also preparing for exit. But how do we have that common communication? That's my love language. And when I met early education, I came at it from the center management side of the house, and then later on, the compliance side of the house. So I've gone back to owning my own business, which I've done for well over 20 years. And I decided to really hone in and focus on compliance and process, two of my favorite things. So we are a resource for early education leaders and their teams around people, process, and technology, and you've got it, all things compliance. We provide professional services, whether it's around helping you build a compliance operations roadmap, audits and assessments coming in and being that second set of eyes and ears, whether it's around licensing or just general operations. We help you build out your SOP toolkit. We do an assessment, so we have a whole library of SOPs. We look at what your practices are, how you're training around those, look at where the potential gaps are and how you can go about filling those so that you can meet your compliance goals. We've also acted as a fractional compliance advisor. So that's kind of a fancy term we're hearing more and more about. Rather than hiring, that you have somebody with subject matter expertise come alongside you to fill that role until you hire or to close the gaps that you're looking to fill. And then the last piece of what the Compliance Alliance does is we're a business ally concierge. So you don't typically think of concierge when you think of early education. But what I hear time and time again is as leaders are visioning what their compliance practice looks like, their number one complaint is, I don't want to have to repeat myself over and over and over again. So our concierge services is helping to bring together the business allies who support you on your compliance journey. And those allies are technology allies, they're HR allies, brand allies. You'll hear more about that. But that's what our role is to have that continuity so there's no handoff and you're left on your own, but that you actually have somebody who's going on the journey with you. All right, so now what I'm asking everybody to do as you're listening to this is to expand your thinking of compliance. Kathy, when you think of compliance, typically what's the first thing that comes to your mind?
Really good question, Lynn, and love your focus there. For me, compliance is a tool and one of the many tools that allow our collective clients to perform their mission or
Yeah.
their purpose. So, and they're not at odds with each other. So you very often think of profit and compliance in this direction and purpose and mission in this direction, and you just can't have one without the other. You can't, they work together like this, and they're not dirty words. They, you know, they have to fit together. So that's what pops in for me.
I appreciate that because I borrow pages from other industries. I'm a big fan of saying, how are other industries doing what we want to do better? Or what are things that other industries are doing that we could expand our thinking on? And when we look at the early education industry, we tend to think of compliance around regulation and licensing. And to be honest, it doesn't always have the most favorable mindset. It's like, oh, licensing is coming. Did I get a citation? Am I in compliance? And what we're looking at here is really broadening our thought to say it's actually more than licensing and regulation. And it's part of your unique value proposition. When you really wrap your arms around your compliance practices, it's part of your story. And we have a great story to tell, and that's part of what we're going to talk about today. So specifically, Compliance Alliance talks about these 7 pillars of operational compliance. We all know regulatory, whether it's our licensing, our state regulations. We talk about quality, the QRIS and accreditation. Those are foundational pieces of compliance that we readily recognize. But I'm also causing us to start thinking about what are other areas where we have compliance. Now, compliance is, on the previous slide, as we talked about, it's a standard, it's a practice. It may be a law, it may be a regulation, but it's the way you want things done. So safe environments, we talk about what are the ways in which we meet our safety regulations or safety practices within our school environment, our building, threat mitigation, workplace safety. That's all part of our safe environment. Brand. I'm surprised sometimes that we overlook just how far-reaching our brand is. So Kathy, when I think of brand, people tend to think of our logos, right? They tend to think of what's on our building. We're expanding the thinking to say our brand compliance or brand standard is every way in which you talk about who you are, your emails, the way on our apps we communicate with our families. Your brand is your extension of your personality. Anything you want to comment about brand? Because we don't typically think of compliance and brand in the same sentence.
Yeah, Lynn, I love that you brought brand into the conversation because people typically think about brand, in my experience, as colors and signage and logos. Where brand is really, you touched on it, it's who are you in your core, how you communicate that to your team, how does your team then communicate and believe in that and communicate that to our children and families. How does it look in your school? How does it's ingrained in everything you do. So it's really, branding is so much more than our historic thought about what our logos look like.
And it's a low cost effort to make sure that there's continuity. It's time, but it's really looking at it. And you made me think of something I can also piggyback on with safe environments. Some of the schools, when we work with them, they say, oh, safety is a priority, and it is, and we see that. But you, with a small tweak, you can say, we have taken a safety pledge. Our safety pledge is, that's low cost. It's what every employee signs. It's what every parent hears. That's part of your brand. That's part of your compliance practices because you're doing it already. Disney talks about their safety practices. They say it's as important as the guest experience. Disney, adventure parks. So compliance and safety go hand in hand, but it's also part of your brand. And I absolutely love that. Simple, low-cost way, have a safety pledge that you can promote on your website. Next, technology. So technology is, I'm very pleased to say, I come from a technology background. I love seeing the use of technology in the early education space. But with that comes a set of SOPs around when do we use it? How do we use it? Are we using tablets? Are we allowing phones? Having an SOP or a policy around our technology, and then partnering closely with your technology providers to make sure that there is a security protocol in place to manage that compliance practice. I love to see the technology there, but it's also broadened our need to make sure we have standard procedures in order to use it properly. No surprise here, human resources. This is, our policy, our legal responsibilities, our policies and procedures. One of our business allies is childcare HR, and this is really making sure that we've put those practices in place and that we're managing those as a component of our operational compliance practice. And then lastly, I'm sure near and dear to your heart, Kathy, are the financial compliance practices, generally accepted accounting practices, monitoring and managing your financial health. And that's what we're going to dig deeper into with your expertise today. Anything missing here? Would you combine any of these, add any, or is there more than 7? I'd love your thoughts about this.
I do not have anything to add to that, Lynn. I think this is a very well thought out group of 7 pillars and touches on most of the functional departments of any company. And I love it. I think that, in some companies you might combine some under the framework of operations, but in our world, they're too important just to say they're operations. They need to be pulled out. So love this.
Awesome. Well, let's just make a fine point here. I always look at how important is important. And some of our leading indicators about compliance come from the following studies or conversations that we're all having. I know you were a contributor to the Line Leader 2024 benchmark study. When it comes to compliance, I believe there were over 3,000 people who participated in that study, but of the priorities, over 60% said that maintaining licensing compliance was the #1 issue. That tells me they're having difficulty doing so, right? They know it's important to do, and we'll see how that gets tied into some of these other areas. One Place Childcare just completed a compliance and risk management study. With that, they gave a ranking of where compliance is as a priority, and it was ranked very high as the priority. No surprise for the work that they do. But what they talked about, the respondents talked about in that study, Kathy, was around the tools and the training to understand the importance of compliance. It's one thing to say you have to be compliant. It's another to say, how do we go about equipping our teams to be compliant and to have a compliant culture where it's not used as a stick, but as the carrot of here are the positive things that come from being compliant. It's peace of mind and it's safety for the staff as well. In addition to that, I know you've had a webinar on this, but what's happening with insurance? Samantha Phillips has been leading the charge on this, where being non-compliant is actually impacting our insurance renewability or eligibility for newer schools. And so we don't want to give them any reason not to insure us, do everything within our power by having a strong, compelling story around our compliance practices. Another trend is legal exposure. And I almost don't want to bring this up. There is a rescue in all of this, but I think it's important to bring this up. I have seen, we're talking about legal exposure here. So in some of the research that I was doing, I was looking at preschool environments, mitigating risk, limiting liability, looking for some good research to support the compliance practices. I found a phenomenal piece, Kathy, that as I read it, I was like, who published this? And I scrolled down, and this isn't all attorneys, but this was a law firm teaching how to sue early education by standard. It even tied it back to the regulation. I didn't see that coming. And didn't know if you've seen any, if you're seeing an uptick in any legal liabilities or frivolous lawsuits or opportunistic lawsuits. Are you seeing anything around that?
I can't say that I have, you know, this is my 38th year in the industry and it happens, right?
Yeah.
I think historically, when I was in an operational role, we would have an incident and I would think, oh, this is going to be a big problem. And parents would work through it with us very well. And then something that, you know, was just a accident that children have could end up being something bigger. So it does happen, and I think we just have to, it's very draining emotionally and time consuming and expensive, but it's part of our work and it's something that we just have to have good resources around and work our way through. But fortunately, I don't think that I've seen an increase.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. And I think what we're saying here is that's a possibility. And how do you make sure that you've got your I's dotted and T's crossed? And it's all things that we're doing already, but making sure that we've got that very strong story, that compliance story that we're telling. Lastly, our parents in your license, I think it's baby.com, who's like, oh, get on to the state site and look up the program that you're looking at attending, look at their licensing record. And when you are in good standing, that's great, but controlling the narrative is a big piece of that. And then the last one is around your financial controls. We all have a fiduciary responsibility to ensure we're using the tuition or our investors' money wisely. And how do we go about doing that? And this is your moment where we're going to switch over and talk about the pillars of purpose-driven profit. So I'm going to stop share so you can share.
Awesome. Let me pick that up. You know, that technology compliance is not my first talent. Are we good there? Can you see
You
up?
did it beautifully. I can see it and you. Go for it.
Beautiful. Okay. So thanks again, Lynn. I am just so very happy to be here and to share what has been the passion of my life for the last 38 years. I come from an accounting background, which was fun and interesting, but not really meaningful until I combined it with the love of education. So my mission and my team's mission is to help people use this tool of money and profit. I'm guessing, because I've only met in my 38 years a handful of people who got into this business primarily to make money, but I hope it is one of your goals, maybe not your primary goal, but I'm guessing that the majority of people are educators who got into the industry as a mission and a purpose. That is also true for me, that the accounting skills and financial controls are a way to do purpose-driven work. And again, thank you for leading me right into what I love to say, which is we often get told and think that money and profit are over here, and that if you're going to do purpose and mission, you have to be on this side, and you can't blend those things together, when I know and want you to believe that you must use this tool well. You must be good stewards of money, and you must live from abundance.
Yes.
You can't live from a fear-based approach with your money. So if you direct your money toward the 5 pillars that get you 95% of the way to financial health, then not only can you do your mission and your purpose, you can do it abundantly, which serves children better, which serves your team better, which serves you personally better. And I can never get started without saying, if you are not personally thriving, you cannot do the mission you got in this business for. So if you're awake in the middle of the night, worried about the mortgage and the payroll, you are not going to show up and serve people well. You must live in abundance yourself. So that's my little preachy moment, and I will move on from there. So
I'm with you.
Lynn, just have I moved on to slide 2?
Not yet.
I thought that I was on the wrong screen, and maybe there now.
You are on slide 2.
Thank you. This is my wonderful team. I would just like to say about them that I feel blessed by these people, as I'm sure you guys do with your teams. We have built this company for 21 years. I spent 17 years in a childcare company, growing them from 5 to 120-ish schools. I had the opportunity to go from a financial role to an operations role to a growth role. And then 21 years ago, I formed Hinge. Our primary work is to help people sell their business and their real estate. We also bring investor partners in for larger groups when they need investment partners for growth. What we do as a mission and as a passion is support people with what we call success services, which help them do their business better today. And as you're doing your business better today, you're not only serving people better, you're building the value in your business. And I know this might be a foreign thought, but as the business value in your building goes, if you own that real estate, your real estate then becomes more valuable. I can explain that another day, but it's true. So here's my wonderful team. We have 6 transaction advisors, 2 attorneys, a diligence team, a financial team. They're located all over the country to get to people quickly, and they're the most amazing people that I've ever had the joy to work with. Super excited. I have to give this plug. So thank you for allowing this, Lynn, that we launched in June, a nonprofit that's been on my heart for years and years and years. Our nonprofit is called Boost. Boost is designed to support the home and health crisis needs of preschool teachers. Since June, we've raised $180,000. We've gotten over 100 applications for support. A lot of those are in process. We've supported 55 teachers with issues like I broke my leg and have to be out of work for 3 months. I don't have the money to do that. My son had medical bills and I can't pay those. I can't pay my mortgage. I can't get to work. I have food insecurity. So we are loving the work that we're doing at Boost. And I would invite you guys to consider supporting Boost. We're also educational and we're helping owners figure out how to support their teams better without having to pay them more, which we understand there's a ceiling, and that's one of my pillars. But there are things you can do that support them financially that are low cost or no cost. So look for that content later. But Boost, super excited about Boost.
Kathy, if you just go, you don't have to go back, but just about Boost, I am so encouraged about this initiative. If everybody contributes, it's the difference in some cases of a staff member leaving you, where it could be where it actually plays into the retention strategy. So I absolutely love this because it is a safety net. It's a way of coming alongside the owners in that true moment of need, which otherwise that staff member may say, I'm out, I have to be. And this could very well keep them in the game. So thank you for launching this initiative. I love, love, love it.
Thank you for bringing that up because it is our mission to keep people in their jobs. If we couldn't do that, then maybe they need to get a higher paying job. Everyone wants to stay in their position. People in this industry are so passionate about what they do, but that's one of our goals. How can we keep you in your job? And not only that, we don't want to just bail you out quickly. We want to go upriver and find out where people are falling in, not just keep pulling them out. So we're providing a lot of education and financial literacy classes and resources. So thank you, Lynn. Thank you for that. It's just very large on my heart right now. Love to connect with you guys. Get connected with us through hingeadvisors.com, and we would love to see you at one of our events. Real quickly, I mentioned our support services division, and we do a lot of things, but I want to mention specifically one of them that will help you when you're listening to this material. I'll also say this is going to be a quick hit of the concepts of the 5 pillars, And I just wrote a book, and it was so much more work than I thought it was going to be. But I did it because the proceeds are going to go to Boost. And we're launching the book at our Shift conference the 1st of November. And it will be a deep dive into these concepts. So look for that, everyone. In addition to our annual conference, we also do a 1-day annual financial deep dive called Thrive. We do various webinars as well. And what I want to direct you guys to is a financial benchmarking tool that's free. It's online. It's called frameworkbyhinge.com. Go to the upper right-hand corner and choose free assessment. This will allow you to input your own school's average tuition rate, license capacity, and occupancy, and it will populate to show you in each expense category what the average school spends in that category. So use that as a resource. But what I want to talk about today is that as I got to know the industry, and with my financial side and my mission-driven side, was working with directors, owners, and teachers to understand how to think about their school from a financial strategy standpoint. I realized I couldn't talk about the 99 things because I would get glassy stares and the piece of paper would go behind them into the bin. And I had to boil that down into concepts that are timeless and that they could learn. And over my 38 years have never changed. So these 5 pillars will get you 95% of the way to financial health. Now, over time, the ways you implement these 5 might shift slightly. They don't drastically change, so that's comforting as well. But these 5 pillars don't change. So the first 3 pillars, which are occupancy or how full you are, your tuition rates, and your discounts, serve to bring in the money, basically. This is your revenue source. So these 3 things work together to create your revenue. The 4th and 5th things are your 2 largest expenses: salary cost and rent or mortgage for most schools. Some schools have a different situation. Maybe their buildings donated. So there's some variances, but the majority of companies, those are their 2 largest expenses. So if you learn the strategies in the revenue pillars and you manage the 2 largest expenses, you're almost all the way there. The second good news is that 2 of these need to be thought about every single day, just 2. Occupancy and salary cost every day. And I'll give you some strategies. The other 3, tuition rates, discounts, rent or mortgage, think about minimum once a year, maybe twice a year, maybe in volatile changing markets, maybe quarterly, but not every day. So if you think about it that way, we then boil down to 2 things you need to have systems around and think about every single day. So let's dig into these a little bit. So occupancy is the single most important pillar in determining your financial health. And what I say in the book is until you've mastered this pillar, or you're at least at financial health range, don't read anymore, don't go anywhere else, don't think about anything else. Get your school to a healthy occupancy. What do we mean by that? So the majority of schools will break even. I used to say 50%. I think it's about 60% now. So somewhere around 60% full. If the school has been designed with an appropriate rent and it's in an area where you can charge the cost of care, which is a big deal with me, then most schools can break even around 60%. You can plug 60% into the framework model and see what that looks like for you. Around 70% to me is the beginning of financial health. At 70%, you should be able to put enough profit on the bottom line just to reinvest in your school. You need a new piece of playground equipment. The HVAC system just died. You need to upgrade your curriculum this year. You need another position. That's just the beginning. Where the real financial health lives is from 70 to 90%. It's kind of hard to hit 100. People do it, but there are usually reasons that you might not enroll to license capacity, which is what we want you to use when you do this analysis. But that's where your financial health lies. If you think about it, you have at that point, you might need a little more food and supplies, but your staff's in place, your management team's ready, your building's paid for, the utilities are on. So very little cost is associated with the incremental difference. There's also a part in the book about working with your team to understand this so that they are involved when you do a tour. And they're not like, oh, really, another one, you know. Let's all understand what could be done with those last 1 or 2 enrollments in each classroom. So strategies here: enroll to capacity in each classroom. Don't forget that you could change classrooms around. You know, if demand changes, maybe room sizes are different and you can move age groups around. Focus on classes with the greatest potential of profit. This is getting really hard because some of our preschoolers are being drawn out into other situations, but where your profit lies is really in 3s and 4s. You know, after school populations are good too, but the numbers are lower because they're not there. The margins are better, but the numbers are lower because their tuition rates are lower, except for the summer. Infants and toddlers have historically been a loss leader in that most people would not make money off of infants and toddlers because parents can't afford to pay what it actually costs. And most operators would use that as the ability to enroll siblings, and also because people are likely to stay once they're in your school. Since COVID, a lot of people use that as an opportunity to right-side their infant rates and get those to a cost of care rate. I have a definition of cost of care that I made up in the book. And basically it means that you're able to thrive, creating thriving situations for children, families, and staff. And that means a lot of things. There are a lot of factors that go into that, but that you're able to charge that rate. If you are nervous about increasing greatly at one time, there are some strategies where you can grandfather your current families. There's strategies to work your way into that. If you're not charging the cost of care rate and you're in financial trouble, bite that bullet as quickly as you can and hope that it works out in your market. Don't just wait it out until you're suffering more, your school's suffering more, and you're in jeopardy of not serving anyone, which is not anything anyone wants to happen.
Kathy, if I can just comment about this I don't know if you're going to talk about this in this session, but what I know is that parents are actually understanding of the increases.
Yes, so good point, Lynn. From COVID until about January of this year, we heard almost zero pushback from families who understood that, first of all, they were thrilled you were there after COVID when they were home with the kids. And also because they love and adore your staff, and staff cost in our survey and other surveys have increased since COVID 30 to 50%. Minimum of 30, in some cases 50%. So imagine what has to happen to your tuition rates to even balance that. And when it's related to staff families can usually accept that more. We did start to hear reports of a family pushback in January of this year. They were like, okay, well, that was fun, but yeah, let's slow this thing down now. So there's a limit. I mean, there has to be. There's a limit to what parents can afford to pay, which is causing us to be better at occupancy and to be better at outside sources. So there are still some. We love some of the state strategies that are going on right now, but you know, again, another conversation, but love what some of the states are doing for their operators. So occupancy, number one pillar. If you're not at least 70% full, don't think about the other pillars. But think about this every day. Where do I have openings? How can I market specifically those openings? How do I bring them in? Do not live in fear. Do not live in fear of what your team will think. Bring your team into the conversation and help educate them about the value in a full school. So, most important one. Okay, tuition rate. So this has always been tough. It's been tough. It was tough 38 years ago. I love to share the story of how my beautiful 2-year-old started childcare 40 years ago, and I was paying $45 a week. And I would come in for full-time care, and I would come in and count the little heads and go, these people are making a fortune. Until I got in the industry, of course, but you will see that happen. And, you know, that's just, I'm an accountant, but still, that's just a lack of information. I do also in the book have a big focus on educating parents about the cost of care. And I have a piece in there that can be shared with parents. So tuition rates, you know, figure out, and you can use the framework tool for this. You can manipulate the tuition rate until you make a certain level of profit. So you can play with the occupancy, you can play with the tuition rate and figure out what it needs to be for you to actually be in a healthy range. So that's your cost of care rate. Your cost of care rate is not calling your competition and saying, what do you charge? Because they're probably living in fear and they're probably not charging the cost of care rate either. Be the market leader. Do not live in fear. We have got to change this thing. Use grandfathering strategies to increase if necessary. For instance, I need to go up 20%. Can my current families tolerate that? I don't think so. I'm going to communicate to them very well. I'm going to increase them 10%. I'm going to tell them they're now legacy families. I'm going to record it that way in my billing system. Stated rate, less the legacy discount. So you are tracking what this business decision is costing you. I'm not saying it's a bad decision. I'm saying I want you to be armed with the information of the impact of the decision you're making. I want you to see it. I want them to see it on their billing statement. I want them to know what you're doing for them. And then start charging incoming families 20% more. It'll take you longer that way because these families need to age up. Maybe you don't decrease their rate when they get to a lesser tuition rate. But, you know, start somewhere.
This also helps with the forecasting of your wait list. If you have grandfathered families, that you can begin to see you're able to charge full tuition to the new families coming in. So I love that.
Yeah, right. Okay, tuition rates. So we have occupancy and tuition rates. Third pillar that plays into our revenue stream is discounting. This is a big preachy moment for me. Soapbox coming. Most operators have no idea how much money they're discounting because they charge the discounted tuition in their billing system. Please charge the stated rate and then record the discount. Again, I'm not judging you on your discount decisions, but I can't tell you how many company valuations we've done where we have said, did you realize you're discounting $180,000 a year? Did you know at your business multiple that's probably costing you a couple of $1 million, know the decisions that you're making. So there are some industry norms around great reductions of discounts. You can also reduce a discount in conjunction with a smaller tuition rate increase that might get your overall financial health even higher than going up drastically on tuition. So first of all, do not mess with your staff discounts. Norm is free childcare for directors. Some people will limit it to 2 children. Some people will exclude infants. I'm kind of wary of doing anything that takes away right now for staff. Assistant directors maybe go with directors or staff, and teaching staff usually pays half. And one great strategy that we're really finding out with Boost that people are missing is, even if your school doesn't accept subsidies for families, get it for your staff. It helps you both, right? So now the staff's paying 0 and you're not discounting half of it. And it's more paperwork and it's more, yeah, but can you do that for your team? Can you do that for yourself? So we have seen a lot of Boost applicants in financial trouble, maybe not self-sustaining in this industry because of the half-price childcare they're having to pay. You don't have to do that. Help them get a subsidy for that. So don't mess with that. Some things that have left the industry: if you are giving away days that parents don't pay for, this is your first place to start. Go do that today. Eliminate free or vacation days. The industry hasn't done that in 15 years. Your competition might be, but again, don't live in fear. And let me say this too. People operating in your market are not necessarily competition. Competition is people in your market providing the same services as well as you are. And if that's true, do better. Be the best so that you can be at the market leader. But eliminate those. So there's a movement to eliminate discounts for multiple children in the family. Tread softly on this one. This has been going on for about 10 years, but it's not broad enough that I would say blanket like I did free days. Stop doing that. Look at this one. Just know it's a trend. It's something you can think about. Some people either have to or choose to not charge the parent copay for subsidy families. Again, know your families, know your market, your competition. And then some people will discount the employees of IBM that sits next to them. If they come over and they give them a 10% discount. Here's how I feel about that. What's IBM doing for you? Is it a true partnership? If the answer is nothing, then those parents would have come to you anyway. So maybe just grandfather those out as well. Or go to IBM and say, did you know that I was creating this wonderful benefit for your employees? What you got for me? Can you pay the difference? Can you cut my grass? Can you send supplies? Can you let me do a parenting class? Can you give my information to your employees? Something. Or consider just weeding this out. This is another one that I don't think business owners really understand what it's costing. Okay, so those are my 3 most preachy ones. I'll move faster through the last 2. So staff costs is really, this is our biggest challenge, and this with occupancy has to be done every single day. I don't have magic answers. We're never going to, people say to me a lot, am I paying my people too much? And it's generally, cost savings aren't usually in what you're paying a person. It's usually in wasted time. So let's say, what we don't look at is the 15-minute increments where maybe someone could go home early. And I give COVID credit for a couple of things. One thing is this worker group loves their personal time. So when I say management by walking around, I mean, hey, you guys are under ratio now. Would someone like to go home? Usually you get, hey, I can't wait. eventually train your team to let you know hey, we can go, at least have them do other functions, have them clean or do something. Other possibilities other than that are to involve your team in the collective decisions about what team resources they have, and being sure that you create the way that you communicate with them, the fact that they're doing meaningful, purposeful work. So it's not enough anymore just to create a great work environment if you don't convince them that you have the opportunity here to grow in your position, and that might cause you to have to grow as a business owner. You know, if people hit their ceiling, then really strong people aren't going to stick around very long. Staffing strategies are so robust and complicated right now that I'm just touching on a few very quick hits, but invest the time into learning these better and be sure that you're on top of your, not only your staff costs, but your staff culture and the way you're growing your team. And then what
I'd
is
like
it?
to comment for a moment on the culture piece of it.
Yeah.
Because part of the work that we do, we see that the staff doesn't have the visibility, so they don't always have the why behind the what. And when you build that culture, and you know, whether it's showing them a licensing visit, like what do the licensors actually, have you ever seen a licensing visit or a financial statement? Teaching them about the aspect of the financial statement that they have responsibility for. That piece of building the culture, that they're part of it, that they understand it. I love that. And it pays dividends. That pays dividends.
It does. And Lynn, I'm a big fan of sharing some financial data, whether it's just enrollment or it's key expenses that they can help work with, all the way to a complete financial statement. I'm a fan of educating your team in financial acumen. I think we don't do enough of that. This slide shows you what just one section of the framework app looks like, which is the section on staff costs. I'll let you guys dig into that. And then I'll say about facility costs that there are certain benchmarks that work, and it's a revenue to expense on your rent or mortgage. And we get with a lot of people talking about, with this building appraised at this, and to be honest, when there's a business in a building, there's a limit to what that business can pay, and it's the business operation that drives the value of the building. That's why earlier I said your financial health as a business determines the value of your real estate, unless you're going to shut the business down and eventually sell it for something else. So we have some strategies here. We have some benchmarks that you can see on the framework app, but understand those in your current situation. Also, if you're growing, reach out if you need to. We're happy to give a quick opinion of, yeah, that based on what you think you can charge in that market, that sounds like it's in healthy benchmark range. But once someone's in a building, if they're in trouble and that benchmark doesn't work, this is a tough one to get around. You're usually stuck with it unless you can be successful renegotiating your lease or your mortgage. And this is a screenshot of the facility cost. So that is a very quick hit of the 5 pillars that we believe strongly in. And Lynn, I'm happy for your questions or anyone else's.
Let me unmute myself as I was chatting away to me. Thank you, Kathy. That was a great rocket ship tour, but a key takeaway of the 5 pillars. So with your assistance, the financial framework, so they plug the numbers in. Does that framework give you what a benchmark should look like? And does it show you where? Tell us a little bit more about that, because I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, sure. So the free version, which is the free assessment, is very powerful. It will say the average school in the United States, and we're tempering this constantly. And where does this information come from? We see financial statements for hundreds of schools every year, national groups, super regionals, regionals, single centers, nonprofits, for-profits, religious-based, non-religious. And this is how they behave on average. You can use the free assessment to play around with your occupancy and see how it reflects your bottom line. You can also play around with your tuition rates. There's a paid version that I think costs $100 a month where you can do more. You can really manipulate your own numbers, create a budget for your school that's more customized. But frankly, the free assessment will get you a long way. So you can really work with occupancy and tuition rates there.
We'll definitely put that in our follow-up because that's a free resource that can get the baseline as what we refer to as a pillar of compliance. It's a standard in this case, or a benchmark that we want to begin to measure ourselves and look at where those gaps are and look confidently at those gaps and not with fear. I loved what you said about that. Something else I wanted to piggyback on that you said when you were talking about our competition. They may be providing similar services, but our situations are all different. And I like to refer to this as when you're talking about your brand, don't get into the better sameness game. What I mean by better sameness is we're like that, but we're better, or we're same, but better. That's not the game to play. It's the language about what really makes you different as opposed to the same, but better. Any thoughts about that?
I love that. Yeah, I think we're preaching the same sermon.
Yeah, definitely. As we wrap up here, so our chat was disabled, it appeared, so we don't have questions, but there are some things that I wanted to just wrap on with you, Kathy, as we look at the combination of the pillars of compliance that we just talked about, and then these 5 pillars of financial profit, purpose-driven, I'm saying it wrong, the financial purpose-driven pillars, okay, that does drive to the profitability. So when we marry those two things together, is there a cost of not being compliant that you could comment on? So whether it's opportunity cost or direct cost, what's your reflection on these two worlds that we're talking about?
Yeah, so Lynn, I think there's a huge opportunity cost in so many areas. So the most important area is in our ability to purposely serve children in the way that they all deserve. It's in being good stewards of the money that parents pay us. It's in being able to support the financial well-being and future of our teams that I know everybody cares so much about. It's about the opportunity to be able to grow to serve more families or not. There are very many places in the country where it's impossible to even get care. So those are just a couple. I mean, I just think that the opportunity costs are huge if we aren't knowledgeable and don't put strategy time to our financial health.
And another question that I have is around our policies and procedures. So whether it's around our financial practices or our compliance with licensing and regulation, we are really beating the drum about having well-documented SOPs, standard operating procedures. Now, it seems like a no-brainer, but regardless of where you are in your stage of existence, whether you're in maintenance mode, you're in growth mode, you want to grow and add another center, or exit or succession planning, are you seeing any gaps in well-documented SOPs as it pertains to the due diligence? And what can you tell us about that?
Yeah, that's a good one. So it's a complicated process when you make the decision to sell your business particularly, but also your real estate. And our team is beautiful at managing that process well and being the buffer zone for that process. However, how it mainly affects sellers is in the value that they get. So the stronger their processes and the higher quality information they can produce lends security to the new investor or new owner. And the lack of those presents a risk to that investor or buyer that they have to mitigate by a lower price. So that's what I hate. I really hate for people to have invested so much of themselves and not get everything that they deserve when they could have along the way invested in processes and systems that would not only have made their life easier,
Yes.
from a personal financial standpoint and from a business standpoint, but then also affects them when they exit. So it's the result is huge. It's really huge. It's huge to the point that if additional resources and people or systems need to be paid for,
That's right.
then do that, because that's small in comparison to the long-term effect of the value of your business and your real estate. So the things you're touching on right now are really huge.
I echo that. And the thing is, they're doing them already, right?
Yeah.
So it's taking the time to get them well documented. Even if they're not exiting right now, one day you will. And imagine that treasure trove of historical information about the practices and how you looked for gaps and how you closed those gaps, how you replicated that for your second and third location. That's like a turnkey ready to go if your SOPs are well documented. And at the Compliance Alliance, we spend a fair amount of time through our audit to say, what are your documented? It's not just your policies. Policies are pretty well documented, but it's the standard operating procedures. How well documented and understood are those? And then what systems do you have in place to monitor and measure? And that is where our worlds also come together, because those are best practices that fuel that financial piece that we just talked about.
Exactly. Well said.
Well, we could carry on with this conversation longer. We're at the top of the hour. So Kathy, thank you so much. Looking forward to seeing you at Shift this year in Santa Barbara, and also continue the great work with Boost. And we'll also be posting that link to encourage people to join in partnership to support our future, our teachers and schools that need that extra little boost.
Thanks so much, Lynn. Great to see you. Thanks for having me.
Yes, thank you everybody for attending or listening on the replay. Thank you.